The Galactic Council chambers stretched into the void. A grand assembly of species gathered beneath the luminous glow of suspended plasma orbs. Delegates from 100 worlds sat in silent deliberation, their forms diverse. Chitinous exoskeletons, translucent flesh, armored carapaces, all unified in the pursuit of galactic order. At the chamber's center, the supreme arbiter Zypher, a towering reptilian Vlath, raised a clawed hand. The murmurs ceased. Humanity, Zypher intoned, his voice a low, resonant growl. A species of contradiction. They arrived at our gates, speaking of diplomacy, of unity, yet their history drips with blood. Countless conflicts, self-inflicted wars, a civilization shaped by violence. And now, they seek a place among us. A ripple of discontent passed through the assembly. A luminescent cephaloid ambassador pulsed blue with skepticism. A scaled Zyran clicked its mandibles in disdain. Even the machine intelligence, the Vexus, emitted a low, disapproving hum. The insectoid historian Krillith, his chitinous body shifting as he adjusted a data slate, spoke next. While it is true that humans once waged war with terrifying efficiency, their recent centuries show a stark decline in militaristic endeavors. They have softened. Their conflicts now are waged in courtrooms, in trade disputes, in words rather than weapons. They fear war because they remember its costs. Zypher's golden eyes narrowed. Then we agree. The humans do not belong in our military council. They lack the will to fight. Before any final declaration could be made, the chamber doors parted with a low hiss. A single figure entered, broad-shouldered, upright, his gait smooth yet deliberate. The human ambassador, Captain Marcus Dane. Dane was a man carved from discipline, his marine past evident in the way he moved, in the way he let his gaze settle upon each delegate as if assessing their threat potential. His face was weathered but calm, his dark eyes unreadable. Unlike the ornate robes of his fellow ambassadors, he wore a simple uniform, functional, unadorned. He carried himself with the quiet authority of a man who had seen war and had no need to prove it. He strode to the center of the chamber, meeting Zypher's gaze without flinching. I hear there's been some discussion about humanity's suitability. The silence stretched heavy. Zypher's scaled lips curled into something resembling a smirk. You misunderstand, Ambassador Dane. There is no discussion. We have reviewed humanity's history, its present state. Your people may have been warriors once, but they have since abandoned that path. You fear war now. You hide behind treaties and diplomacy. Dane exhaled slowly, clasping his hands behind his back. Is that so? His voice was quiet, even, but something in its weight made the air shift. Krillith adjusted his mandibles, sensing the tension but pressing on. The evidence speaks for itself. The last great human war was centuries ago. Your military now is a fraction of what it once was, relying on automation, distant strikes, careful diplomacy. This council values peace, and while we respect humanity's intellect and adaptability, your species no longer holds a resolve to engage in true warfare. Dane tilted his head slightly, as if amused. You think we've gone soft. A mechanical voice droned from the Vexus representative, its cold logic unyielding. Analysis confirms. Humanity's recent actions indicate a reluctance toward prolonged conflict. Your forces engage only when necessary, and even then, with restraint. Dane chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. And that's what you base this decision on, that we don't enjoy war. He looked around, taking in the assembled species, letting the silence stretch before he continued. Tell me, how many of you have actually fought a war? Not directed one, not issued commands from the safety of a war room, but stood on the ground, heard the snap of gunfire, felt the weight of a dying man in your arms. Some delegates shifted, others bristled. Zypher's expression hardened. We are not here to glorify bloodshed. No, you're here to decide whether humans belong in your war councils, Dane said. And you've already made up your minds based on your observations of diplomats and politicians. Not Warriors. Zypher leaned forward, his massive form casting a long shadow. Then tell us, Ambassador, where are these great warriors of yours? Dane's lips curled slightly. Out there, working in silence. While you debate theories, they train in the dark, prepare for wars you don't even see coming. You think we fear war? No. We just know it better than you do. Krillith clicked his mandibles again, uneasy. Your words are bold, but they are merely that, words. Dane nodded, as if expecting that response. His posture didn't shift, but the room seemed to feel smaller around him. Then let me make it simple. You want proof? Give us a test. Put us against your best, and we'll show you exactly what you've miscalculated. Zypher studied him, unreadable, then let out a slow, deep exhale. Very well. If that is what it takes to settle this matter. He turned to the assembly. The council will prepare a combat trial. If humans are truly the warriors they claim to be, they will prove it. A murmur spread through the chamber, but no one objected. Dane gave a slow nod, his expression unreadable. Perfect, he said. Now, let's see if your best can keep up. The war moon of Ephra hung in the void, its scarred surface pockmarked from centuries of simulated battles. It was here that the Galactic Council had chosen to settle the debate. A controlled war zone, free of civilians, where combat trials had tested the mettle of countless species. The perfect stage for what was to come. Marcus Dane stood on the observation deck of the Arbiter's Reach, his eyes fixed on the barren expanse below. The Council had wasted no time assembling an elite force, hand-picked warriors from the most battle-hardened species in the galaxy. A strike team of 10, each representing a civilization with centuries of combat experience. The best of the best. And against them, 4 humans. Behind him, boots scuffed against the deck plating. Dane didn't turn. He didn't need to. He already knew who was there. Hell of a setup, Jack Carter muttered, folding his arms across his chest. His massive frame made the room feel smaller, his presence heavy with an old soldier's confidence. Council's throwing everything at us, huh? They're convinced we don't belong, Dane said. They think we're a relic of a violent past. Ryan Graves, the team's tactical commander, leaned against the bulkhead, his sharp eyes scanning the hollow display of the war zone. Then we prove them wrong. Ethan Raines, the team's designated infiltrator, let out a low chuckle. Or prove them very right. Dane finally turned to face them. This isn't just a test. This is a message. We're not here to survive. We're here to win. The chamber's door slid open with a hiss. A mechanical escort stepped forward, its metallic limbs moving with inhuman precision. Combatants, prepare for deployment. The trial begins in 1 hour. The team exchanged glances. No one spoke. There was no need. The drop pod shook violently as it tore through Ephra's thin atmosphere, turbulence rattling its occupants. Inside, the Marines sat in silence, each man checking his gear with methodical precision. Armor plate secured, ammunition counted, weapons primed. Dane adjusted the strap of his rifle, his gaze steady. Across from him, Graves was already mapping out possibilities in his mind, mentally dissecting the terrain. Rain secured his combat knife, a quiet ritual of focus. Carter flexed his fingers over the grip of his heavy repeater, his expression unreadable. A sharp tone cut through the silence. The pod's display flared to life, revealing the incoming enemy force. 10 alien warriors, each a veteran of countless conflicts. A towering Thalvran shock trooper, its armor bristling with energy shields. A Yvani blade dancer, its twin plasma sabers humming with lethal precision. A trio of Drev skirmishers, their exoskeletons as durable as reinforced plating. And others, each species a living testament to war. Raines let out a slow whistle. Council really stacked the deck on this one. Dane smirked. Wouldn't be fun otherwise. The pod jolted as it made contact with the surface. A second of silence. Then the hatch blasted open, and the Marines moved. Dust billowed as the team spread out, taking cover among the jagged rock formations. The simulated battlefield was brutal, uneven terrain, limited visibility, the sun casting deep, shifting shadows. Somewhere out there, the enemy was already closing in. Graves crouched low, eyes scanning the ridgeline. They'll probe first, test our defenses. Dane nodded. Let's not give them the chance. Rains, you're on recon. Carter, set up a kill box. The sniper was already moving before Dane finished speaking, his form melting into the landscape. Carter took position atop a rocky outcrop, his heavy repeater resting against his shoulder like an old friend. Graves and Dane moved together, watching the terrain with a predator's patience. Then the first shot came. A streak of blue plasma lanced through the air, striking the rock near Graves' head. He didn't flinch. Instead, he rolled into position, rifle up, eyes tracking movement. Contact. 2 skirmishers, 20 meters east. Carter's repeater roared to life. The first Drev warrior was torn from cover, its exoskeleton shattering under the onslaught. The second leapt aside, impossibly fast, returning fire with deadly precision. Dane was already moving. He sprinted forward, weapon raised, sighting in on the enemy's position. A control burst. A sharp cry. The second skirmisher collapsed, its body twitching. Silence. Then a low, rumbling laugh. From the shadows, the Thalvran shock trooper emerged. Nearly 8 feet tall, its armor pulsed with kinetic shielding, absorbing the ambient energy from the battlefield. It moved with deliberate confidence, plasma cannon whirring to life. Carter spat. Big bastard. Graves exhaled. I got a shot. Dane shook his head. Not yet. The Yvonne blade dancer stepped into view beside the Thalvran, its saber spinning in a mesmerizing arc. A challenge. Dane glanced at Rains, who was already grinning. The Marine ghosted forward, his movements precise. The Yvonne-S blades blurred as it lunged, but Rains was faster. He sidestepped, pivoting on his heel, and in a flash of motion, his combat knife found the alien's throat. A single twist. The Yvonne-S body dropped. The Thalvran roared, cannon charging. Now! Dane ordered. A single rifle shot cracked through the air. Graves' round found its mark, a narrow slit in the shock trooper's armor. The kinetic shield flared, then failed. Carter opened fire. The Thalvran staggered, armor cratering under the relentless barrage. It fell to one knee, struggling to rise. Dane moved in, pressing his weapon against the creature's head. A single pull of the trigger, and the battlefield fell silent. The dust settled. The enemy force lay scattered, motionless. The test was over. Dane exhaled, scanning the field. That it. A sharp chime from the Council's command relay answered him. Trial complete. Combatants, return to base. No celebration. No cheers. Just the quiet efficiency of men who had done this too many times before. The Marines regrouped, weapons at rest, their expressions unreadable. Rains wiped his blade clean. Reckon the Council's rethinking their decision? Graves chuckled. They will be. Dane turned his gaze skyward, toward the waiting ships above. The Council had seen what they needed to see, and this was only the beginning. The air was thick with tension, the scent of scorched metal and disturbed earth clinging to the battlefield. Dust swirled in restless spirals as the distant echo of movement reached the Marines' ears. They had won the first engagement, but the test was far from over. The Galactic Council would not accept a simple skirmish as proof. They wanted a demonstration, undeniable evidence that humanity had not lost its edge. And so, they sent another wave. Dane crouched beside a jagged outcrop, his rifle steady against his shoulder, his ears tuned to the distant hum of approaching combat units. A mechanical whine cut through the silence, followed by the rhythmic, deliberate steps of something far heavier than a soldier. He signaled to the others without a word. Graves adjusted his scope. Incoming. Mechs. Carter grunted. Figures. Couldn't let us have a fair fight. Emerging from the dust like wraiths of war, two towering war machines stomped forward, their plating gleaming in the eerie half-light. They were piloted constructs, massive engines of destruction equipped with pulse cannons, missile arrays, and enough reinforced armor to shrug off direct hits. Behind them, a second squad of alien warriors advanced, using the Mets as mobile cover. Rains let out a low whistle. This just got interesting. Dane considered their options. Direct engagement would be suicide. They had the firepower to take down infantry, but Mets were another matter. He tapped his comms. We split. Graves, Rains, flank right. Carter, you're with me. We'll draw their fire. No hesitation. No argument. They moved like clockwork. Years of combat experience reducing the need for wasted words. The first mech fired. A pulse cannon discharge sent a shock wave through the ground, shattering the rocks where Dane had been moments before. He dove, rolling into cover just as Carter unleashed a suppressive volley, his heavy repeater spitting fire. The alien infantry scrambled, breaking formation, but the Mets remained unshaken. Their cannons charged again, twin barrels glowing with lethal intent. Graves' voice crackled in Dane's ear. I see a weak spot in the plating. Neck joint, right side. Copy that, Dane said. Rains, can you get up there? Already moving? Through the dust, a dark figure darted forward. Rains moved like a shadow, his form blending into the battlefield. With practiced precision, he scaled the debris of a ruined transport, using the wreckage as a launching point. The mech's head swiveled too late to track him. A flash of silver, a detonation charge affixed to the exposed joint. Rains hit the ground in a controlled roll, just as the explosion rocked the battlefield. The mech staggered, its right side failing, servos screeching in protest. Carter wasted no time. His repeater screamed to life, pouring heavy rounds into the exposed wiring. A final shot from Graves punched through the weakened plating, and the towering war machine collapsed with a metallic groan. One down. The second mech adjusted its strategy, stepping back to create distance. Its targeting systems recalibrated, locking onto Graves' elevated position. A missile bay slid open with a mechanical hiss. Dane's gut twisted. Graves move. But the missile was already away. Graves threw himself from his perch just as the explosion consumed his vantage point. He hit the ground hard, rolling to disperse the impact. Rains was at his side in seconds, dragging him into cover as debris rained down around them. Dane clenched his jaw. They needed to end this. He signaled Carter. New plan, distraction, and disable. Carter grinned. On it, the Marine charged forward, an impossible force of nature against the towering war machine. He unloaded an entire magazine into the mech's visor, the impact cracking the reinforced plating. It wasn't enough to destroy, but it was enough to blind. Dane sprinted through the chaos, weaving between the scattered remains of the battlefield. He reached the mech's exposed leg servos, tearing a charge from his belt and slamming it into place. The adhesive fused instantly. He didn't stop running. The explosion tore through the air, sending the mech crashing to one side. The cockpit hatch tried to eject, but Rains was already there, ripping it open. A single shot ended the fight. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the crackle of dying fires. Dane stood slowly, taking in the destruction. Their enemies lay scattered, their war machines reduced to broken husks. The trial was over. A new voice cut through the comms, one that had been silent until now. Supreme Arbiter Zypher. Impressive. Dane turned his gaze to the sky. The Galactic Council's observation ship hovered above, its judges watching from a safe distance. He could almost feel their uncertainty, their doubt eroding. Zypher's voice held something new, something he had not expected. Respect. The Council has seen enough, the Arbiter said. Humanity's place in the War Council will be reconsidered. Dane exhaled, lowering his weapon. The fight was over, but the war for humanity's place in the galaxy had just begun. The silence that followed was heavier than the battle itself. Smoke curled from the wreckage, the scent of scorched metal, and ozone lingering in the thin atmosphere. The battlefield, once a proving ground, now stood as undeniable evidence of the Council's misjudgment. Dane pulled his helmet off, letting the cool air touch his sweat-slicked skin. His muscles ached from exertion, but his mind remained sharp. He turned his team. Carter was reloading with practiced efficiency, as if expecting another fight. Rains wiped the last traces of blood from his combat knife, his expression unreadable. Graves was already running diagnostics on his rifle, despite the fact that they had been ordered to stand down. The comms crackled to life again. Supreme Arbiter Zypher's voice returned, more measured than before. Human combatants, you will remain in position until further notice. Dane exchanged a look with Graves. It wasn't a dismissal. It was hesitation. The Council had come expecting proof of humanity's weakness. Instead, they had seen something they could not easily explain. Minutes stretched, each second heavy with unspoken deliberation. The enemy dead lay still, their war machines reduced to ruin, but the weight of judgment still loomed above them. Then a new transmission. Prepare for transport. A pulse of energy rippled through the field as a retrieval beacon activated. Light flared, engulfing the Marines, and in an instant, the battlefield vanished. The Council chamber was a stark contrast to the war-torn landscape they had just left. It was pristine, polished metal and towering glass, the very air humming with controlled power. The Marines stood in the center of the vast circular hall, surrounded by tiered seats filled with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. Some faces were impassive. Others barely concealed their discomfort. Dane straightened his stance, meeting the gaze of the assembled leaders. Zypher stood at the highest seat, his imposing form wrapped in ceremonial armor. His glowing eyes regarded the humans with something that was no longer mere curiosity. You were not meant to win, Zypher said, his voice carrying through the chamber. This was a test of resilience, of skill, but above all, of control. The Council believed humanity had lost its capacity for war. His gaze swept over the assembled delegates. We were wrong. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some whispered among themselves, their voices low and urgent. Others remained silent, their gazes locked onto the four men standing before them. Dane didn't wait for permission to speak. We didn't win because we're stronger, he said, his voice calm but firm. We won because we don't fight for sport. We don't fight for pride. We fight to survive. Rains tilted his head slightly. You stacked the odds against us. We adapted. Graves crossed his arms. We always do. Carter exhaled through his nose, the closest he ever got to a laugh. And we're just the retired ones. Zypher studied them for a long moment before addressing the Council once more. For centuries, we have believed that progress meant moving beyond war, that those who still embraced conflict were relics of a bygone era. He gestured toward the Marines. But these men do not fight for conquest. They do not revel in destruction. They wield war as a tool, not a purpose. Silence. Then, from the lower seats, a delegate of the Ivani race stood, the same species whose warrior had fallen to Rain's blade. His gaze was measured, but there was no malice in it. Humanity does not fear war, the Ivani said. They understand it. A second voice followed, this time from a Thalvran commander. And that makes them dangerous. Dane held the alien's gaze. Only to those who threaten us. Another murmur swept through the assembly. The weight of centuries-old beliefs was shifting, a foundation cracking beneath the undeniable truth. The Council had expected humans to be relics, outdated remnants of a violent past. Instead, they had seen something they could not define, an understanding of war that was neither reckless nor weak, but precise, calculated, necessary. Zypher straightened. The Council will deliberate on this matter. Until a decision is reached, humanity's status remains under review. Dane knew better than to expect immediate victory. Politics moved slower than war, but the shift had begun. They were no longer dismissed as outliers, no longer underestimated. As they turned to leave, Rain spoke under his breath. "They'll never see us the same way again." Dane nodded. "Good." The chamber doors sealed behind them with a deep, resonant hum, shutting out the weight of the Galactic Council's deliberations. The four Marines strode down the polished corridors of the station, their footfalls echoing in perfect rhythm. Though their weapons had been returned, their real armor had never been stripped away. They carried themselves as they always had, heads high, eyes sharp, bodies poised for whatever came next. Carter glanced at Dane. "So, what now?" "We sit around and wait for a bunch of aliens to decide if we belong." Dane exhaled slowly. "That's the game." Graves snorted. "Never been much for games." Rain smirked. "Except the kind we win." Dane allowed himself the ghost of a smile. They had played their part, given the Council something to wrestle with. The battle had been one thing, but shifting an entire intergalactic order was another. Still, the cracks had formed. It was only a matter of time before the whole foundation shifted. A voice interrupted their thoughts. "Commander Dane." They turned. A young officer stood rigid, her uniform marked with the insignia of the Earth Diplomatic Corps. Though she looked fresh out of training, there was steel in her posture. "You and your team are requested aboard the Trident," she said. Immediately, Dane studied her for a moment before nodding. "Lead the way." The Trident was humanity's newest flagship, a symbol of their resilience and defiance in the face of galactic dismissal. It hung in high orbit, its dark hull reflecting the distant glow of a blue star. Inside, the command deck thrummed with controlled energy. Officers moved with purpose. Tactical displays flickering with live feeds of Council activity. As the Marines stepped onto the bridge, an older man turned to greet them. Admiral Kane. His face was carved with the lines of long service, his eyes carrying the weight of decisions most men would crumble under. "You did what you needed to do," Kane said without preamble. "Now we deal with the fallout." Dane met the Admiral's gaze. "And what does that look like?" Kane gestured to the main display. "The Council isn't just deliberating. There's division forming. Some believe we've proven our value. Others see us as a threat." He turned back to them. "A decision will come soon, but whatever it is, the balance has shifted. They won't be able to ignore us anymore." Carter folded his arms. "And if they decide we're a problem?" Kane's expression hardened. "Then we remind them why humanity survived in the first place." A silent understanding passed through the room. The war they had fought today had been one of perception, of proving humanity's worth in the eyes of those who sought to write them off. But the next war, if it came, would not be fought with measured demonstrations. Dane looked around the bridge, at the men and women who stood ready despite the uncertainty. This was what set humanity apart. Not just their ability to fight, but their refusal to be erased. Kane stepped forward. "You four did more than win a battle. You changed the conversation. Whatever happens next, humanity walks into it standing tall." Rains exhaled through his nose. "About damn time." Graves smirked. "Guess we better get comfortable. Something tells me this new era is going to be interesting." Dane let his gaze drift to the viewport, where the Council station hovered against the void. Somewhere inside, the most powerful beings in the galaxy were deciding humanity's fate. He already knew the answer. They weren't asking for a seat at the table. They were taking it.